Hi there, this is Matt at State of Flux here with a review for Star Trek II, The Wrath of Khan. This is my favorite Star Trek anything. This is my favorite Star Trek movie, without question, my favorite show, favorite collective season. This is the pinnacle of Star Trek for me. And this is one that I almost never saw. I had only seen Star Trek the Motion Picture. I rented it when, back in my video renting days, they had the 5 for 5 deal, rent 5 movies for $5. And I rented Star Trek the Motion Picture, and my dad was like, don't bother with that one, you can start with number 2. And at this point I hadn't even seen the TV show, nothing. I was completely new to all of it. And I watched Star Trek the Motion Picture, and I hated it. I did not like that movie. I hated it then more than I hate it now. Now I've grown to appreciate some aspects of it, but then I despised it, and when I told my dad about it and was returning it, he was like, don't let that be your only dip into the Star Trek. Watch Wrath of Khan. Just watch Khan. And this was the last movie that he had seen, but he was a fan of the old show. However, he had seen this movie and he loved it. So I, after his urging, was like, all right, I will watch Wrath of Khan. And it was the last of the 5 movies that I watched. I almost didn't even watch it, but I did. And I was blown away. I was blown away that the movie made me cry at the end of the film. I couldn't believe it, that I was that emotionally invested. And to anybody who gives crap to William Shatner, his delivery on the line of his was the most human makes me cry 100% of the times that I've seen it. Every single time. And it's the artistry of watching somebody trying desperately not to cry that gets you to do it. It releases the emotion for you. You release it for him, because he's trying to hold everything together. So that was a bit of a spoiler alert. But moving on, I like this movie. This is a great movie. This is my favorite movie of the 80s. This is in my top 5 favorite movies of all time, and it wasn't always. This is one of those rare movies that gets better every single time I watch it, and I can find and discover new things that just, like, capture and captivate the mind. This is a movie that offers food for thought for things that may have been. This is a genuine continuation of what was planted in that space seed all those many episodes ago of Star Trek. Star Trek is very episodic, and this just feels like a final adventure. And this was kind of a little bit designed as a series finale. They had much success with the motion picture, but they didn't know that they'd be able to continue anything on. And they had a good sense that what they were working with was good, which is why they kind of bought their way back into a 3rd movie should this one turn successful. But at its core, this feels like a series finale, an end point. And it offers growth and learning from your main character, Kirk, with the devil and angel on his shoulder, the devil passionate medical doctor, Bones, and the logical angel on the shoulder of Spock, which I talked about all those many videos ago. And the utilization of them is quite great, because neither of them are particularly in the movie a lot. They're there to govern and guide Kirk. And it was probably a really smart idea at the end of the day. Like, had this been written now and they were planning an out for Leonard Nimoy, I think they would have had him much more front and center throughout the entire film, so that when his death happens, it really has this huge impact. Not recognizing that having a person just kind of always being there, always at your side, should you need to rely on him, is just enough, so that when he isn't there, and all it takes is for Kirk to look at the empty seat to know exactly what he's about to lose and go running, and the score starts swelling. Like, that is powerful. And it's not because he had such an incredible amount of screen time in this movie. It's because he's a character with gravitas. He's a character with presence. And so whenever he's there, you notice them and you feel them. And so when he's not there, hot damn do you feel that too. But the movie itself, Nicholas Meyer is a phenomenal filmmaker. He hasn't made a ton of movies, and I don't understand why. A lot of his better movies, or better received movies, are of the Star Trek lore. However, he also did Time After Time, which got him this movie, and Time After Time is a great unsung gem of a film. If you've never seen it, do yourself a favor and check it out. It's a masterpiece, just as this one is, to a much lesser extent. But it is a great film of the 70s. But Nicholas Meyer, what he did was, there were multiple scripts out there for Wrath of Khan. And even though he's not the credited writer for this movie, he should be. He is the one that wrote the screenplay as it is in the film performed by the performers. He did the dialogue. And he took what was working best with the multiple, I think ultimately 3 different drafts of a screenplay, all with different plots, and funneled it into this film. Like, Khan was going to be the villain. That was kind of set in stone. But you had one that was very heavily emphasized on this whole Genesis planet idea, and you had this one that was very revenge-driven, and he whittled this all down, while also not being really a fan of Star Trek, which is kind of fascinating. He came in with an outsider's perspective to give perspective to these characters who've grown beyond where they once came from. And that is kind of brilliant. It's not always the answer. I think it's only the answer when you have somebody that is taking great care to guide the story where it needs to be. And this franchise will touch on that again, and we'll get there someday. But until we do, Nicholas Meyer's contribution as screenwriter, uncredited, is astonishing. He is so good, and we need to recognize it. Visually, this is a much more interesting looking movie than the previous one. While it may not have all the glitz and glam, it has carefully calculated shots. And the camera, what unfolds in front of the camera is the information that you need to get to the places you're going emotionally. So maybe some of those camera angles kind of aren't framed in any dramatic or dynamic way foretelling a big, grandiose space opera, but this isn't concerning itself at being that. It's concerning itself with being a human story of a person who is grown beyond fears he has grown beyond his relevancy, and trying desperately to grasp back at that, while also coming face to face through video cam. They never actually meet. Coming face to face with somebody who so has been shaped, and his entire ideology has been shaped by the man that Kirk once was. His past is coming back to harm him, and this is a man who believes that the good times were behind him, is confronted with what those good times truly ultimately meant. And it's fascinating, the work that's at play. I think DeForest Kelley has the most unsung, I keep using that word, I apologize, that'll be the last time, well, this will be the last time. He has the most unsung performance in this film. Most people turn to Nimoy, Montalban, Shatner for giving a really strong performance in this movie. But lest we forget DeForest Kelley. He has some of the best moments in the film. The scene where they finally learn what the Genesis Project is, and he's like, according to mythology, it took 6 days, but look out now, it'll take 6 minutes. That whole scene where he's just fear-mongering what this thing is capable of is really good, and that's prime Bones material from the old show. But you also have this beautiful, dramatic moment that's just a beat between two friends that the show never allowed for. This is the first time we get these people off of work, out of regulation clothes, and you have an early on moment with Kirk and Bones just sharing Romulan ale, I believe. And it's two men talking to each other. And that scene grounds the entire movie. It shapes the narrative trajectory that Kirk needs to go on by having him confront out loud the fears that he's having, and the doubts that he never had power to voice before. And the scene is beautiful. It is so strong. And it would be mirrored in other Star Trek projects afterwards. But that scene is absolutely phenomenal. And it's really a scene where Kirk, when confronted with his passion, realizes that his passion was to never give it up. And you have the guy who's always been acting as the voice of that passion asking him, why did he? And what's brilliant is that when we next get the angel-devil thing, we have a scene with Spock that's a one-on-one between those two having a conversation unlike they ever really did on the show, where Spock agrees with Bones without saying it, that Bones is right. He says, if I may so, logic tells me that you never should have given up being captain. The stars are where you're meant to be, kind of thing. That's paraphrasing, but it's much more eloquently delivered in the film. But yeah, how these characters are written is really where it's at. Now, you do lose some of the characters in the shuffle. Chekov is off ship, and he's given a fair amount to do, but he's kind of vilified. He's, like in modern film terminology, they kind of Hawkeye him from the first Avengers movie, where like he's part of the team, but he's also kind of not part of the team until he is, but he's also like being manipulated by the bad guy. It's very much that kind of scenario. So I guess Avengers Chekoved Hawkeye. And Sulu's there, as is Uhura. Like they're definitely there, and you'll see them, and they'll say their lines or two, but they don't really have much of an impact. This is really a very, very Kirk-centric story, where you get quite a bit of a new character played by Kirstie, who's pretty good as the Vulcan, R.I.P. And Mr. Saavik, I believe is her name. You have quite a presence of Spock, and Bones has his like couple little guiding moments, and then Scotty has a little bit of work to play. There's like the first confrontation with death. The theme of death and mortality runs through this whole thing. Kirk is feeling that he's moved past his own relevancy, and the only thing left for him to do is he's just kind of waiting around to die, but he's never been confronted with true loss, or the sense that he has lost anything. At this point, he's lost his ship. he's lost his captaincy. And when he gets that back, he gets taken down almost instantly by Khan, who we'll touch on pretty soon. And he's confronted with the first new crew member that he meets of Scotty's crew, who's his nephew or whatever, who dies in his arms and whatnot. And that red blood stain that is latched onto his shirt lingers there for quite a while, as a visual nod to the first manifestation of loss. True loss would be looming at the very end. Yeah, so it's time to talk about Khan. Khan was an interesting bad guy in Space Seed. He was, I think, only interesting in that he was an incredible intellect, but also a physical threat. And that's a character that is kind of like Superman or overpowered. Not Superman like but like he's a Superman kind of philosophical creation that is just kind of overpowered. Can a man of modern intellect be able to take this man down? And it was an interesting episode, but to bring him back and then have him have this compelling drive for revenge that is unyielding is great. But Ricardo Montalban is what makes that work. He does the work to make this character soar. He acts the hell out of it. He chews the scenery with what he's going on in the most like powerful kind of ways. He is talking so sly and sinister, and landing this beautiful prose from Shakespeare repeatedly throughout the film. And he has some of the best quotes. Everybody, we'll turn to a couple of them here and there. My favorite, though, has got to be the old Klingon proverb of dish best revenge is like a dish best served cold, and it is very cold in space. His delivery on that is just stellar, effing stellar. And speaking of quotes, the quotability of this movie is just shocking. There's so many good ones. The needs of the many outweigh the needs of the few, or the one. And how that gets spun around a couple of times. Kirk, upon seeing Spock in the very beginning of the movie, taking his glasses off and being like, "Didn't you die?" And then Spock just kind of doing the eyebrow thing. And then how that has a ripple effect in the end of the movie. Like, oof, that hurts upon second watch. Obviously, all the talk about the Kobayashi Maru, like this, Kirk's son saying, "Oh, he cheated," and his delivery on that is great, and how Kirk explains how he cheated the Kobayashi Maru test, and how he's then confronted with the Kobayashi Maru test in a different kind of way. And when he's confronted with the death of Spock, and has to watch Spock die in front of him, and Scotty and Bones holding Kirk back, saying, "No, you'll flood the whole compartment. He is dead already." And then Kirk talking to Spock and saying, "I am now and forever shall be your friend," and then putting the hands up is just beautiful, beautiful imagery. I have pop figures of it. I love it so much. But yeah, there's a lot of them. My favorite line, though, the best delivery of Shatner in the entire film that's not an emotional one, is when Khan starts to lose. And it's when they're trying to come up with a battle plan to take Khan down, and Kirk talks to Spock, who says that, well, Khan is very intelligent. He isn't thinking about space in 3 dimensions. He's not thinking 3-dimensionally, which of course he wouldn't, but Kirk, having navigated space and whatnot, does think 3-dimensionally, and so when he's able to loom his ship behind Khan and start taking him down, they have a throwaway cut to Shatner where he goes, "I'm laughing at your superior intellect." But the way he delivers it, oh, chef's kiss, is just perfect. Shatner, for my money, he is a genuinely good actor when he is given opportunity to bring himself to that point. He needs a little more coaching. The director, Nicholas Meyer, talks about that a bit on the commentary, where he comes in with absolute swagger and starts delivering things in 1 or 2 takes, which explains the show quite a bit. He's very big and broad, but the more takes he does, the more natural he becomes, because he gets bored with the material and he starts talking like real people do. And so he is a good actor. His instinct is to go big, and he really needs to operate at a more even pace, and so when he gets there, his scenes are very strong. Nimoy is the opposite. Nimoy is somebody that would get things on take 1, take 2, take 3, and then by the time he'd get towards the end, he wouldn't be on point and he'd be frustrated with the material. And so that it was a conflict of getting the two to work at an even kind of tempo. But yeah, I honestly could talk about this movie forever, and this is a movie that I probably will revisit on this channel again. I talked in my previous review, if you've watched the Jaws the Revenge review, that I might do a commentary to that film. I most certainly will do a commentary to this film when I find somebody to do a striking commentary with. I have 1 or 2 options that I think would be good, but I want to do a commentary. But I might also just get like a panel of people talking about what this movie means to them, because it means so effing much to me. It is a powerful film, and there's so much I could talk about in every single scene that I just absolutely love. I didn't even talk about the Lucasfilm animation of the Genesis effect. I hardly talked about Genesis and the implications of that. I didn't really talk about Kirk's son. This film reveals that Kirk had a son, and the Carol Marcus character, who is kind of just disposed of after this film, regrettably, until she comes back later, and we'll discuss that at some point. But I didn't really talk about them much, and there is stuff to say there. This movie has beats of horror that are actually pretty striking. This movie has some action, but it's not conventional action. It's sort of like submarine action, and it's tense scenes rather than exciting scenes, and it's just very well directed and visually kind of interesting. The use of lighting in this film, I also need to talk about, is really quite strong. There's lots of great uses of shadows and stuff like that. When Kirk first appears, he's in silhouette and walks into the light, just as when the Enterprise starts to finally turn the tides against Khan and his ship, it is by, it rises up into the frame similar to how Kirk first appeared. There's a mirroring effect there that you see throughout the film. I like all the stuff with the Genesis Paradise Planet, even though it looks very matte painting-y. It's really good and interesting and conceptual. But yeah, I love this movie. I could talk about it forever, but I won't. Let me know what you would like to talk about in this movie down below. The last thing I will leave you with is Spock shouldn't have died. Or Spock should have died. They shouldn't have done the remember moment. I don't like that. I like, and I think it's important when characters die to have that remain. And the worst thing that this movie did was, after bringing Spock back in the next one, it gave an excuse to bring other characters that die back. Now that doesn't really become a problem until much later, and we'll address it when we get there, but for my money, Spock's death is so powerful, so potent, so painful, and so it matters so much that he should have remained dead, and the fact that this movie had the guts to keep it that way is quite strong. It is a powerful ending. The next movie suffers for it, and we'll talk about that movie, because I do have a lot of interesting things to say about Star Trek II. Or, this is 2, Star Trek III, The Search for Spock. Thanks for watching. Like, subscribe. Do all that good stuff.